There's been a big issue in Australia with wool production, with superfine and fine wool production, and that's been a big industry in Australia, and it has been a very important industry. But over the last 20 years or so, the profitability of these industries have been falling, and so many farmers question why should they continue to produce these beautiful natural fibres if their livelihood's threatened, if they can't make a suitable living. So it's been important to try and focus on how to improve the quality of knitwear. So you say, well, why knitwear? I mean, knitwear has become an increasing part of the textile trade at retail. So going back, say, 50 years, many people would go to work in suits and they'd have jackets and so on. And if you travel around in many countries, you'll see even people in the fields, the farmers, will be wearing jackets and so on. So that's woven goods, but in more modern times there's more casual wear, more leisure wear, and that's where knitwear comes to the fore. Yeah. So the real issue is, well, how do we produce comfortable knitwear so that people do not have these negative sensations like prickle, and there's other sensations like feeling sweaty, or is it damp or muggy, and there's there's about 10 or 12 reasonable sort of sensations that people detect. Yes, women seem to be more sensitive. I mean, it's possibly because men. I mean, it could be something to do with men, or it could men. A lot of men have more hairs on their skin, and so on, and that might be acting as a bit of a barrier. But it doesn't really matter. Women buy a lot more textiles generally than men. So if you're concerned about selling woolen products, then you need to be very much aware about the women and what they're choosing to do. So in a broad sense, wool can cover the other natural fibres that we were talking about today. And in our trials with women, we've included cotton, polyester, and some cashmere garments. But the main focus was on wool, merino wool. Yeah, that's right. I mean, as fibre diameter was reduced, comfort continued to decline, so that once the fibre diameter was less than, say, approximately 17 microns or micrometers, the detection of prickle declined to very low levels. I mean, but it did keep declining down to about 14 microns. Small decreases.
That's cashmere, basically.
Well, this was using most of the work is done here with wool, and I showed the graphs about superfine wool. The cashmere and cotton are similar at that diameter, but polyester was worse than the wool. But the issue here is that the diameter is not the only thing. There are other things in the construction of yarns and in the making of the fabric which also influence, say, prickle response. We haven't identified crimping in this regard as being important, but the crimping of the wool is related more to the softness of the products. This is not an allergy reaction. This is a physical interaction between the skin and the fabric. So you asked the question a moment ago about what's causing it, and it's fibres which basically poke into the skin, and they need to be stiff enough to do that, and there's a certain force required to sort of activate the nerves. So if the force is sufficient, then the people will feel some sort of a prickle response, very commonly on the back and shoulders and so on. And the prickle response increases as the skin becomes moist. So in a sense, the skin is softer, in a sense. It's more easily...
is that because the pores are wide?
Well, the skin expands and there's more blood flow and so on. And so if people get into a more humid environment, or they're more active, so there was information provided, so when they're walking in a hot room, like walking around Hong Kong today, if it's 30 Celsius and 80 degrees humidity, people will feel sweaty a little, and that'll increase the likelihood that they'll feel prickle sensations from anything worn next to the skin. Not just, say, wool fibres, but any fibre near the skin is more likely to cause a prickle response. Well, that's right. So just a bit more background here. The research program with the Sheep Cooperative Research Centre in Australia has been focused on developing some instruments to assist the textile trade to to evaluate the properties of this knitwear. So one is the comfort meter, which is designed for the prickle response, and it's highly related to the wearer's responses. So higher numbers are related to a worse sort of comfort score, if you like. And also a handle meter, which is looking at some of these properties that people feel. So the handle meter was actually calibrated using a big panel of experts. So people in the textile trade who are familiar and they work every day with feeling fabrics and evaluating the handle properties, like are they soft, hard, and so on. So the instruments work very well in giving a sort of an objective measure of these different parameters. And when we relate, say, the softness or the overall handle of a garment with the prickle, we find, as you pointed out, there's no relationship at all. So they're different properties. The fact that something's soft doesn't necessarily mean it won't prickle. It'll prickle if it's got certain fibres in it, if it's made in a particular way. So it can be soft, but it could be prickly. Yeah. So they're different. They are different things. And if you think about it, feeling with your hands do a lot of work. Yes. So the hands are designed to do certain things, but it's different to your back. Well, the evidence that we showed was that as you reduce the mean fibre diameter of the fibres in the knitwear, then the prickle response has declined to the lowest level we can detect. So there seems to be always some people who are sensitive, even with very fine wool, the 13 micron wool or cotton. There are some wearers who are very sensitive and they're a bit uneasy. And it's very hard for those of us who aren't that sensitive to quite understand that. But that's the evidence, and it's the same as there's evidence that there are some people who don't feel prickly, even when the fibres are really coarse, and most people feel prickly, but there are always some who don't. So, biology is a bit like that. You can't satisfy everybody all the time, but finer fibres are better. So that's good for all the fine fibres. Cashmere is generally very fine, so that cashmere garments should have the lowest potential for prickle. Ultra fine, super fine wools, same also. They have a low propensity to cause this prickle discomfort. So it's important for manufacturers to know that, and we think it's important for consumers to know that as well. If the wool's very fine, what that graph showed was that the comfort meter values were really low. So when the comfort meter values were less than 300, then we had over 85% of the wearers saying they like the garment. So that's sort of implying that they would be happy to buy one. Obviously it depends on the price and the style and the colour and all the other things that consumers look at. But if they wear it and they think this is good to wear and they're happy with it, that's the first thing. So manufacturers have an interest in this because they don't want to sell garments that consumers are unhappy with. You're not going to go back and buy a prickly garment if you say, and that's the history. The history has been that some people in the past have sold garments that were prickly, it caused a lot of prickle, and people say, oh, well, all wool is bad. Our evidence says, no, that's not true. Some wools are more likely to cause prickle, but there's a whole lot of wools which are much less likely to do that. There's a number of things to control here, and look, there's always room for improvement. So technology keeps changing. There's things about controlling yarn qualities, there's about how we knit things. So there's always improvements in different types of technologies, and it's important for people interested in garment comfort and so on to keep testing this properly, in properly designed experiments and evaluating them with people. So, certainly the results of this work show that the finer the wool, the better, and you get the minimum amount of discomfort with this super fine, ultra fine wool.